So if you look at this slide, you'll see that there is a tiny URL to get to these the slide deck here. It's tinyurl.com/CUSD SeeSaw. So if you want this slide deck to refer to, you can go to that link. It tells you what SeeSaw is. We kind of talked about that. We talked about all the devices that could be used for this. And also that there are some lessons here that are kind of inspirational. So you would want to refer to the slide deck just to kind of look at what are some things that you can do with SeeSaw. What wasn't recorded was how to create an account in a class. And so you would just go to app.seesaw.me, sign in as a teacher. I recommend using the teacher sign in with Google. And when you do that, then you can import from Google Classroom, your roster from Google Classroom. It's very convenient. Then it's going to prompt you to create a class where you have two options. You can import from Google Classroom, or you can manually add students into a class. So if you're using the import from Google Classroom, that is convenient if you already have students in Google Classroom. So you're only going to select that if you have students that are in that. It's going to give you some options about how to have students sign in. We recommend the sign in with Google option, and we go into that. And so you can add more than one class. You can also switch to a student account so that you can show your students the student view. And then later in the video, this part was captured in about the settings. So
when you get signed in here, up here in the upper right corner, you're going to see a little wrench, and that's going to be where you go to take a look at the settings that you have available to you. And so up here at the top, you'll notice that you have an add students and families. That is also going to be located at the bottom of your screen in the right corner. So if you need to add students or get a code, we'll talk a little bit about that. Sometimes, usually once your students have signed in, their class will sync up unless they change devices, and sometimes it just doesn't sync and they might need a code again. This add students button is going to be where you can get a code, and they change all the time. It doesn't mean that a previous code is necessarily expired. It just means that it's a security feature that they have for students. So when you click here, this is where you can change the name of your student, add your grade level. If you are going to be inviting co-teachers, this is where you're going to go under Manage Teachers, because you will be sending an email to invite them. I would confirm with them what email they have created if they've already created a class. I always recommend to teachers just sign in with Google, because then you don't have to remember another password and email. And then when you invite your teachers to co-teach, you're going to use that long email address as well. The theme and icon. Oh, and here it is right here, as a matter of fact. So let me click back to that. Once you scroll down, here is where you have that option to choose what kind of sign-in mode you're going to have your students use. So if you find that you need to make a change here, you're just going to go to your wrench and then you can choose what you want your students to be using. Another thing that's really important here, here we go, likes and comments. I personally don't love to have to manage that kind of thing, especially in this learning environment. So I would recommend that you turn this kind of thing off unless there's a specific reason that you want it on. Likes, comments, that kind of a thing, and also knowing the maturity of your students. If you want to have an additional item to manage, then of course it's up to you. It's teacher discretion. I usually leave this part off at home. Keep in mind when we do come back, and you'll be SeeSaw experts at that point. If you decide you want your students to see each other's work, you need to make this adjustment before you assign it. Okay, because potentially you could lose work if you change that once the assignment has already gone out. So just keep that in mind. If you want to require approval, you have that option. Item editing, I like this. And I'll tell you why when we get a little bit further in. But if you don't have that draft feature, and your students have to save their work when they're working in SeeSaw. And so by enabling item editing, your students have the ability to go back and continue working on an assignment, even if it's not finished, and because then you've kind of enabled this feature for them. Another thing, super important, student, the sample student, because that's you. So you want to be able to model for your students, especially your little people, what the expectation is for the lesson. So I would always turn this on so that I can model for students what I want from them. Another thing, folders. You can create a folder here prior to even making the assignment, if you already know what you're going to be making. One thing that SeeSaw is, I don't want to say the word lacking, but organizationally, you cannot nest folders inside other folders like you can in Google. So what that means is if you just make a math folder and you attach an assignment to math, you could have 15 assignments with all of your students' work inside of that potentially. So I would recommend that you put folders by activity. Maybe you color code by subject. So maybe all of your blue folders are math. So if you're looking, that might be a little bit easier for organization. But if you do not put your activities into folders, they are simply going to just populate down that journal stream, and that can get very cluttered very quick. So I would highly recommend that you use folders. And this is not the only place that you can make a folder, but it's one of them. So any questions on settings? Okay. All right, and you can of course look back at this. Most of the recommendations that were on here were, oh, and this is where you can go to archival classes too, would be your wrench. So pretty much anything that you need to do to manipulate your settings, you're going to go to the wrench to do so. Back to this side, we kind of chatted already about this right-hand panel over here. If I was looking at student work, you can see that here are some examples. And when I was talking about that enable editing, if a student has turned in work, in the lower right-hand corner, there are 3 dots. And for the student, I gotta scroll up here a bit. This is where they can edit their post. So if the student did not finish and they had to click to turn in because they were done working for the day, this would be how they would go back and access an activity that is not quite finished. So, Joanne, did you want to talk about the add button, or was I talking about the add button?
I think I'm doing that part.
I think you are too. Okay, let me stop sharing. Let me just move my little, there we go.
Okay, so I'm going to show you guys what it looks like when you very first started. This is what your screen's going to look like. So once you've created your account, obviously I don't have any students in here, but you can create your account without creating or putting students in right away. You can do that later. In fact, if you need to add students at any point, there's a student add button down there. And if you're wanting them to join with Google, so you can kind of wait to decide what you want to do with that, you can decide here. So that's how I would add students to this class if I wanted to do that. But we're going to kind of just work our way around. We just did the settings that were over here. Now we are going to this green add button. Your students are going to have this green add button, and so are you. When your students look in here, they obviously are not going to have assign activity, but they will have post student work. So students can come in here and just kind of create everything on the fly without it being an activity. And savvy students do that all the time. They'll come in here, they'll click on post student work, and they'll just do a piece of artwork for you that just gets put into the main journal. But what you guys are going to go to all the time is the assign activity section. So when you go to or actually I'll show you the student tools first. I'm remembering Courtney and I talking about what we're going to do. So this is what your students would see if they went into that post-student work. They have all these different tools that they can use, but you also have this when you want to create your own activity for them. You use these same tools. So you can take a photo of something that you want your kids to maybe annotate or add something to, just create a drawing. You can put a video in. You can actually just take a video of yourself. You can have your students take a video. I know my son's in kindergarten and he reads his books to his teacher on SeeSaw so that she can hear them reading. You can upload something. You can even have your kids come in here and take a note. So for example, if you click on note, it's this nice lined paper, and then you can have them turn it in. So if you say, okay, you know, write me a summary paragraph or type a summary paragraph of what you heard today. This is just, like I said, kind of a really on the fly activity, you know, use your spelling words in a sentence type of thing. And then they could just click the green check mark and turn it in. Okay. So you can also add in links. If you want your students to go, you know, watch a video and then do an activity that's based on that video, you can do that. So lots of different things that you have, and your students also have the same tools that you have. Okay, and then, so I'm going to go into the activity part. I'm going to make sure that we are on track here. Shared all the tools. And then when you go into the drawing tools, I'll show you guys that. Your students have all of these tools to access to. And what's really neat is that SeeSaw has made shortcuts, and we'll show you this later too. SeeSaw has made shortcuts to where when you're typing your instructions for your students, these tools actually show up as the picture. It's a really great visual for students, because if you want them to use the microphone tool, there's a shortcut for that you add in your instructions, and it gives them that picture. So they can look at your instructions and know exactly what tool they're going to use for that activity. And so we'll get to that too, but wanted to show you guys all of those different options that your students and yourself have. So now we're going to go into what do you do when you want to assign an activity? Well, you can go look for one in the free library, or you can create your own. And so if you go back to the green button, assign activity, you're going to see that I have an extra tab that some of you will not have. I have a tab that's called School. And the reason that I have that tab is because my school has just a handful of teachers that have teacher accounts. And so when you hear us reference free account and paid account, it's like $120 a year for a teacher to have a teacher account. And then your school can also have an account. And I think it's like something like $550 per student. Not all of our teachers wanted to use it. So we used our COVID money and bought accounts just for the teachers that wanted it. So when you have paid accounts at your school, you can have a school library. So if I create a lesson and all of my third grade teachers want to use it, I can put it in that school library, and then they all have access to it. And then my library is activities that I have added. Either I've created it or I've added it from the community library. So when you see my library, those are lessons that you have saved. I believe that the free version allows you to have 100 free. And so once you hit 100 lessons in your library, you got to get rid of some and add different ones. So I want to show you the community library. So if you go in here, you can see that I had said that my class was going to be a second grade class, and you can change that too. So for example, let's say you do teach second grade, but you have a student that's learning more at like a first grade level, or you have reading groups or something, and you have a group of students that you want to assign just an activity to a lower group of students. SeeSaw is going to allow you to select students to assign activities to. So you don't have to assign an activity to your whole class. You can actually select students that it goes to, okay? So just a little side note. So let's see, what's a second grade topic that I can search for? Anybody want to see something? Math, language arts?
Two-digit addition.
Two-digit addition, okay.
Just so I know that that's going on.
Okay, so if I just want my kids to just practice some two-digit addition, it doesn't have to be anything fancy, or I do, however, like to look at how many likes or adds. Really, when you click on that heart, it adds it to your library. So when you are looking through the community library, I like to look at that, just like I like to look at Amazon reviews. It tells me that this must be a pretty good lesson. And just know that whatever you see here, if it's not perfect and it's not exactly the way you want it, you can edit some pieces of it to make it yours. So I see that there's zeros in this ones place, and maybe I want my students to practice that, being able to do mental math when there's a zero in one of the ones places. So if I click on this activity, it lets me view it. And there's those fun little shortcuts that I was talking about. So you can see also that this teacher has actually added voice instructions to their activity. That's something that you can do when you create your own, okay? So your students would actually be able to listen to you read the instructions to them. That's what makes this so beautiful for our young kids that are not proficient readers yet. You can see that this teacher added a template here. So this was just a PDF or something that she had, and she wanted her kids to engage in SeeSaw with this because she's not wanting to make copies, or she can't because it's distance learning. So if I want to use this, I can click on the heart, and that's going to add it to my library. Okay. I can't, if I want to share the activity, I can. So always looking for those three little dots, because there's always more options in those. You can print it, you can share it here. Like if you want to share it with another teacher, you can share it there, or you can share it later. So let's just say I want to use this activity. I'm going to click on the heart. Now, after I've clicked on the heart, where did it go? It went into my library, but I can also just assign it. If I don't have a lot of time, I can just assign it right then and there. It has that blue bar at the bottom, and I can just assign it to whatever class I want to assign it to. But before I assign it, I want to get rid of that teacher's voice instructions and put my own in, because my kids are going to be like, who's this person? You know? Do you have to do that? No, but you can personalize it when you make it your own. So if I can see that I am clicked in my library. That lesson is now in my library for me to use now, maybe for me to use next year if it's awesome. Okay. So now that it's in my library, when I click on those three dots, I can copy and edit. So I can't just edit it. I know it's already mine because I made a copy of it, but I'm going to actually copy and edit. And what you can do is you can change those voice instructions. You can add more instructions. So you can edit it to be yours, and then your name will actually show up here on the copy that you create. Okay. Courtney, have I gone into what you're supposed to be sharing? I don't even know.
I was just listening. No, it's all good.
Okay.
So,
all right.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Okay. So, but like I said, you can copy and edit, and I'll show you what that looks like really quick. So now I'm in editing mode, and this is actually what it looks like when you want to create your own lesson. You get to name your activity, you get to add your instructions. So you'll see that these shortcuts that I was telling you guys about, there's a word that's kind of nested between 2 colons, and that is how you get the activities to show, or sorry, the tool to show up as a picture. And we have that PDF included in our slide deck so that you can refer to that when you're creating your own activities. So again, I could add more instruction here, remove some, take out this teacher's voice instructions, and that's where I'd be able to add my own. I can also add a video. So if I wanted to do like a Loom video or Screencastify video and actually show the students how to do this activity, then I could add that too. Okay, so many options. This is where you could add a template, remove a template, make it your own, like I said. So I'm gonna just take that person's voice off of this assignment and I'm gonna click save. That's really important. And now you'll see that when I go back to my library, I'm gonna have 2 of those, okay? So do I really need to keep this one now that I've made my own copy of it? Probably not. So I can go in here and then I can remove that one by going remove from my library. And now I only have the one that has my name on it, okay? And so now if I go into assigning that to my class, I'm gonna assign it to this little demo class. And like I said, you can have multiple classes. This activity now will show up for your students here. And that's where they would add their response. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the slide deck and see how far I've gone off course. Hopefully this is all making sense to you guys. And then, so Courtney, where am I stopping? I'm sorry.
I was going to go into more detail with how to create a lesson.
Oh, okay, so I'll go ahead and go into, now that I have it assigned, am I supposed to share how a student, we can be a demo or a sample student? Should I show that?
Oh, you can, yeah.
Okay, all right, so now that I've assigned this activity, I may want to show my students how they're going to do it before they're even sitting in front of a computer to do this, okay? So as a teacher, what is so awesome, I love this about SeeSaw, I wish everything had this. You as a teacher can click add response, so you can model this fully for your students and tell them exactly how you want them to do it. You have a sample student. So what's so neat is you can go in just like a student does, click on that sample student, and you can come in here and you can show them and model exactly how you want them to do this. So you can show them how, if they forget what the instructions are, they can click view instructions to see exactly what they are being expected to do. So this teacher is having them use a text box to type in their numbers. You could also have the students write on the screen what their answers are. And then this teacher is actually having them record their answers and explain how they solved the problems. Okay, so students can refer to the instructions there. I think the save as draft is that, I think that's only part of the paid version. Is that correct? Yeah. So this button is not going to pop up in the free version. Students won't have that option with the free version, but that's okay, because normally you're just giving something that they're going to finish at that time. Okay. I always let students know that there's a magnifying tool up here, because oftentimes if you're putting a PDF in, it can be kind of small because it's showing the whole thing, and there's no way, the kids can't pinch and zoom into the activity. So they have to use the magnifying tool. So I highly recommend going over these tools and showing your kids how to use them, so that they know how to do that. And then I went to touch my screen and that doesn't work. So they actually have to drag this little box. and they can use that with any kind of touch screen. But once they have that larger, it's a little bit easier for them to work on. And then they would use this text box tool to insert their answers. And when they're done, they would just click this check mark. So you could go through and show them how to do all of that. Okay. All right. So Courtney, I think, we went to model. Oh, and then you already showed how to edit. If I turned it in and I didn't mean to, they can go back and edit. So yeah, it really, if they don't have that draft option, they can use the edit option. So yeah, and then you're going to go into how to create a lesson.
Yes.
Okay. So I will stop sharing.
Okay. And let me put this up here. And let me head back over here. Okay, so if I am taking a look at back on my dashboard page here, and some of this stuff we already kind of talked about a bit, but some questions that have kind of come up since we have kind of gotten into distance learning, and then also how some more advanced, I would say, kind of options with what SeeSaw is capable of. When you're creating a lesson, one thing that's come up is how do I make moving parts? So what some teachers have asked are, well, how do I take something that looks like this and notice that I'm able to drag and move the pieces? How can I put that into SeeSaw so that my students can? And the answer to that is, as is, this that won't work, because what will happen is you'll end up with a static slide and none of the pieces will not be movable. The workaround on that, if you're willing to do it, okay, if you're really just like, I have to be in Google, this is what I'm using, this is what I want. The workaround on that is to actually right click on each of these things and, whoops, I'm not sure if it's going to do it. But essentially what you're going to have to do here, and I can come back to this, is all of these, you would have to actually create images and save each one and then import them into SeeSaw. And so you would have to put this onto basically a drawing, and you'd have to put each individual shape onto a drawing and download it. So that to me is a lot of work. I would say that your better bet is to try to find something already created in SeeSaw. Or create your own within SeeSaw, especially if you're working with something like shapes. So if I'm here and I go to add and I go to assign activity, whoops, I clicked the wrong thing here. Hold on. What's happening on my little screen here? Sorry. Let me do that one more time. Assign activity. And I go to create new activity. And let me just go back really quick so you can see that. If I want to actually create a new activity, I clicked kind of quickly on that, but notice that by default, yes, I'm in my library. I don't have paid, we don't have like paid classes. So notice I don't have that school tab up at the top. So if I want to create a new activity, I'm simply going to go here. I can give this a title. And so if I wanted to work with shapes, for example, I don't know, something, maybe I'm going to have them drag and sort shapes on this particular activity. I can add in those directions that I want to give and potentially voice instructions. But what I wanted to really pay attention to is adding a template, because this is going to be where you give your students something to work on. And so when you click add template, you're going to get taken to this page here, where this is where all your students have these same options. So if it's something that maybe it's a Venn diagram or it's a sorting type 3 columns, something of that nature, I could simply go here and I could select it from something that's saved to my device, or I could find a file that I have ready to go in Google Drive and I could import it. If I don't need something, I don't have to do this. What I could do is I could simply go here to drawing And this is going to give me the whiteboard that my students have the ability to manipulate. And I love the whiteboard on SeeSaw. I think this is a great tool for students to work with math, with all kinds of different things, actually. But let's say I wanted to do shapes here that are going to be movable for students. If I click these 3 dots here, I have shapes as an option. And so technically speaking, I could just click here. And if I click off of this, again, 3 dots, those are our friend. If I click this, I can duplicate this way, or I could use my shortcuts, Control V. Whoops, that's the wrong one. Let me copy that first. And then I could make a whole bunch of these. Now, students might have the option to change the color if you want to give them that choice, but basically they will have then the ability, I could arrange these. Maybe I'm going to give directions and tell students that they need to count 6 shapes, and then maybe they're going to need to write how many they've counted, and they're going to record themselves reading it. This is very primary and very basic, but you can even make text boxes. So I know in a 4th grade class, we were doing a volcano activity. They did research on a volcano, and then they actually had to draw the type of volcano they had, and then they had to type a research paragraph in a text box on SeeSaw, because we were looking for a digital way for them to be artistic. And so this was a great website for them to be able to do that. So if I was finished with my template, maybe all I'm going to do is put these shapes on here. That's it. All I would need to do then is click this green circle. And so right away, when you're working with students, I would teach them they always need to look for the check mark, because that is how they're going to save it. If they X out and they close it, they're taking a chance that SeeSaw is not going to save their work. Because after a while, it's going to time out and it will be gone. So right away, I always teach them green check, kiddos. You have to look for green when you're working in SeeSaw. Another thing, the free version only allows you to put 1 slide if you create it yourself. It looks to me like when I've looked on other activities, if it's already created, you're okay. But if you are trying to create an activity, you only get 1 slide per activity. So just keep that in mind when you're planning your lessons. So if I was done with this, I would click the green check. And then this is going to be the template that I have attached to this activity. And so here it is, okay? If you decide you want to actually do the activity for your students and you want to model it for them, I would first click save, okay, to save my lesson. And then this is going to take me back to my classroom after I go to my library here. So if I'm ready to assign it, I wanted to call your attention to one thing here. If I was going to assign this, this would be where I could choose the class that I want it to be assigned to. So if you have multiple classes, this is where you get to choose. Additionally, pay attention to this right here, because this says edit students, folders, skills. So if you want to assign that to a folder here, you can click folder. And then I can either create a folder. So notice up here at the top, I have tabs. This is where I would select specific students to receive the assignment, or I could check the all students box. This would be where I would go to folders, and I could create a folder here. So if I don't have one made, it's okay. I can just make one right here. Notice I have the green check mark again, because that's the affirmative yes. For basically almost everything, I always look for green in SeeSaw. So if you are finished and ready to go, that would be how you would then assign it to your students. What if I did want to create an example for them? You're going to have to go ahead and let me just quickly assign it. And so then if I wanted to view it in my classroom after I assign it, I would click view. And then what I can do, a few little steps involved on this, but if I click add response, and then I am the sample student, and let's just say all I wanted to do was show, maybe I told them to please circle all of the yellow stars. That's what my directions said. And maybe I wanted them to write how many there are. So there's 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And so I'm going to have them write 5. Maybe I'm even going to tell them to click the microphone and say, there are 5 yellow stars. I could do that. So here's my example for students. I'm not going to record it right now. And by the way, your kiddos are going to love the glitter pen. It's like the best thing ever. It will make them really happy. But I could click this green check. So this is not attached to the assignment yet. I've just turned it in as a sample student. This is what I see. But if I go here, I can click save. And it's going to save it as picture. And notice it dropped down here in the lower left corner of my screen. So if I go back to my assignment here, so a few little steps involved, and maybe there's an easier way, I don't know, but this is just the way that I have always, that I've done it. If I click on the assignment, whoops, I need to edit it. Then I could add instructions, and then I could just drag this here. So then my students would have an example to see. And then again, I click the green check. So now when my students see the assignment, let me go ahead and, whoops, I gotta move you guys out of the way. Hold on one second. There we go. I have to click save. So when I go back to class now, if I was to assign this then to my students, then they would see this once I reassigned it. So those are just kind of some options for you. But any questions on that? No? Okay. A couple other things that kind of came up with just things that teachers have asked about. One thing that came up is printing. And I don't know how much printing you're really going to be doing at this point. But one thing that is nice about SeeSaw, if I was looking at, let me see, if I clicked on the journal, for example, and let's say that I was going to print, I wanted to look at my sample student, which is in fact me. If you notice here, when you click on a student, up here at the top, you can print a PDF of all of the students' work. So let's say we're back in session, or you wanted your student, your teachers, or I mean your parents to have access in this way. You could click print PDF, and it's kind of cute because it makes like a really nice little memorable piece for them to keep from for going forward, I guess. View and print PDF, and it makes this little cover for them. So because this child or myself, that I have 8 assignments on here, if I scroll down, notice it's going to say the teacher's name and then the student's name, and it will give the copy of each child's, of each of their assignments. And it will also give the QR code, which is kind of nice because then if they've recorded their voice or a video, the parents can read that, and then they can actually hear them and see them too. So I kind of like that. I think that's kind of neat. You can also just print an individual activity, but just keep that in mind. You have that option for each student should you choose to do so. So is there anything else that we needed to kind of cover? I feel like we kind of blazed a trail through there. What else did I want to kind of look at here? I think that was pretty much it. Oh, sometimes too, I will say this. When I am working with, especially the beginning, when you're first starting out with assignments, you've kind of got a couple options. This was a first assignment that we did with, it was a 4th grade class. And I picked this because I wanted to intro students to multiple tools. So they would kind of learn how to use all the tools in a lesson, and then we would be ready to go. And so I was kind of looking for something like this because they were able to use the draw tools. They had to learn how to use the text boxes. They had to make shapes and be able to drag, and we learned how to copy and paste. So keeping in mind the age of your students, you could choose just one lesson and pick one tool to work on at a time, depending on their age, or you could choose something that's going to give them a little taste of everything, so they kind of get acquainted with the whole website or the whole platform. So this was a good one, and you can change the little numbers on there, but I liked that this gave a lot of variety for them. It was a fun activity.
And I've seen for the little ones, they do sight word activities just like this. where they have to write it, they have to say it. It's really great, like
Mhm.
very, very similar.
Oh my gosh, and they're so cute. Yeah. And
Yeah.
here are my words. Anyway.
Yeah. So we only have 7 minutes left, which is crazy because we have a lot to cover still.
Okay.
Well, I mean, I think there's just so much you can do in SeeSaw, and we want you guys to. I just hope that nobody's feeling overwhelmed because I know when my teachers first decided to dive into this, it was like they're constantly like, hey, I can't remember how to do this. And we just are going to be here for you guys. If you have those types of questions, just don't be afraid. Okay. But what I wanted to show you guys is, okay, now that you've assigned something, how are your kids supposed to get in and do that? And I think that is where a lot of anxiety comes from, is what does that look like? So I think we're ready to share that, right, Courtney?
Oh yeah.
Okay. No, that's okay.
Yeah.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you guys what it looks like in the slide deck. So there is a piece where you can send announcements, and to be honest, I haven't really done this very much, but that was the third item that is in the plus sign. So you can send announcements. I also have not played around with the family piece a lot with SeeSaw. Have you, Courtney?
With the which piece? I'm sorry, I was reading the chat.
Adding the family. You can add families, and parents like get a notification on their phone when a student does an activity. I think once our world goes back to normal, that will be awesome. When kids are in school doing activities, families can actually see that on their devices. So a parent that's connected would get a notification that their child did something in SeeSaw. So
I have a couple classes that are using that, a couple first grade classes, and they just kind of dove in to SeeSaw at the beginning of the year, and yeah, and they their parents I know really enjoyed that feature.
Right, and so that can be done here with the just like you add a student, you can add a family, and so you can just basically put parent contact information and invite them to be a member, and they only see their kids' work, obviously. So you can also share an announcement. So if you wanted to tell your kids something, kind of like on Google Classroom, you can make an announcement on SeeSaw as well. So when students log in, kind of like Courtney and I were saying, is that Google G option is so handy. It's just teaching kids how to use that. So when we think about kids using the sign in with Google option, well, they have to be signed in to Google Chrome for that button to work. Otherwise, what's going to pop up on the screen is it's going to ask them for their Google email address. And if we're trying to prevent kids from having to type anything in, then we're going to want to train them how to sign in with Google. And so that's where you kind of have to decide what works for you. My teachers, some of them like to they actually put a link to their SeeSaw activity in Google Classroom, because the kids have an organized day and they just add the SeeSaw link in there, and the kids click on it. It takes them to SeeSaw to log in, and they click the sign in with Google option. Well, because they're already signed into Google Classroom, they're already signed into Google Chrome. So it's kind of seamless that way, where if you're just having students go straight to SeeSaw, if they click that sign in with Google option, they need to be signed into Google. Does that make sense? They need to be signed into Google Chrome for that button to work. So some teachers have their students go to Clever, click on the Google G, go back to their Clever tab, and then click on SeeSaw. And what that does is when they click on that Google G and the blue continue button, it signs them into Google Chrome. And if they're borrowing a school device, or they're using a device at school, that's how it would work. If they're using a personal device and they're already signed into Google Chrome, then they wouldn't have to do that. But it's getting them to sign into Google Chrome to be able to do that. But otherwise, if you are going to give them your code, so let's say, for example, I am going to not have my students sign in with Google. Do you guys want to see that option? Okay. So if they're not signing in with Google, then I'm going to click on this no. Okay. And I'm going to say that everybody's pretty much using one-to-one devices right now. Okay. I need to add students in here. So I have a class where this is already done, but let's see. Okay. So this is, you would have to manually add your class. So this is, I'm not importing from Google, okay? Then what I would need to do in that option, I would need to have my kids put in this code within 60 minutes, which seems kind of crazy. This is just, this code will keep changing. So you would want to provide this code to your kids where they're going to be signing in right then and there. Does that make sense? Okay, so that's just one option. So another thing that you can do, and I'm actually going to show you guys, is that the sign in with Google option. This was my other class, sorry, hold on. Yeah, I have all these test classes. You can see these are several of our texts that are part of this class, and I did the sign in with Google option. So if I needed to add another student, you'll see that they will, you can, if you do the sign in with Google option, the email/Google option, their code lasts the whole week. So I'm not sure why SeeSaw does that. It's just security, like Courtney was saying. But if they're going to choose to not do the Google sign in or not sign in with Google option, then that code only lasts 60 minutes. But if you're going to have your kids all get on at the same time, that's fine. If you have a kid that doesn't get it on right then and there, you would just provide the code for them when they're ready. It's just that the code changes every 60 minutes for security issues, for reasons, for security issues. I don't have any teachers that chose to do the other option. Everybody just wanted to do the sign in with Google because they didn't want their kids to have to type anything in. But this is where it gets complicated. If they do the sign in with Google option, so for example, our kindergartners, this is the sign in with Google option. The very first time they went to sign in, they put this code in, and then they click sign in with Google. They'll never have to put that code in again, okay? So I'm gonna go back to the slide decks and show you exactly what that looks like. I think the hardest thing to explain to teachers is that if they use the sign in with Google option, they have to be signed into Google Chrome for that to work, okay? So this is the screen your students would get. They would click sign in as a student, and they would need to put that text code in one time, okay? The text code that is in for one time, and then they would click go. And that is whether they are signing in with Google or not. If you're providing them a code to get in, then they're in once they put that code in one time, okay? Now, if you're not using the sign in with Google option, the student actually has to click, they have to select their name from a list. Is there a chance that they might select someone else? Yes. Where the sign in with Google option kind of eliminates that. Courtney, am I?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, they have to confirm still by clicking the green little
right.
check that they check the right name. So it does check for them. It's just a matter of, if they're going to understand when they go to Clever to click and make sure they're signed into Google. If you think that's going to be an issue, then you can type in their name, their names, and have them do the text code. So,
but I feel like, and this is just my personal opinion, training kids to click on the Google G to get signed in to Google is so critical for so many different things. Like it's a skill that they need to know. So the sooner they start doing that, the better. So I think training them to click sign into Google, then go back to Clever, click on SeeSaw and click sign in with Google, they don't have to type anything in then, except that code that first time. Right? Okay.
Good. Yeah.
Yeah. So once they click that sign in with Google option, they see their name, they click on their name. And then once they've done that, their computer kind of gets used to that. And it remembers that. Okay. And then they see that basically the same screen that the teachers do. So, yeah. Okay. So that always is where I get a lot of questions, is that the student signing in for that first time. So that's why I always feel like it's so important that the teacher can try to model that for them. Okay. Any questions? Okay. I'm trying to think if I thought of anything else.
Nope, I think
you can leave comments. We didn't even really touch on that, but you can comment on your students' work. And I know you touched on that in the settings a little bit, if you allow students to do that. Something that has been asked of me is, how do I put this in Google Classroom? Well, if you want to put an activity in Google Classroom, you would go to the activities, and after you've assigned it, in the 3 dots, you can get a student link. So in those 3 dots, after you've assigned it, you can get the student link, and you can copy that, and then you can hop over to your Google Classroom, and you can post that as an assignment in your Google Classroom if you're using Google Classroom. And then basically that just provides a link for your student to click on. It's going to have them sign in to SeeSaw still, but they're already signed into Google, so they just click sign in with Google, and then it takes them straight to that activity. So some of my teachers like to do that because they really like their kids' work to be all organized in Google Classroom. So that is something you can do. And the way that that would look is, if I went to classwork and I went to create assignment, I would just add that link into my assignment. And it's going to look like just a sign-in page here, but it actually does take them to the activity. So if you did want to use SeeSaw with Google Classroom, that is how you would do that. Okay. So I am free to answer questions for the next 10 minutes or so. And any of you that would like to go, you can do that. And feel free to email Courtney or I if you have questions. And I see there's several things in the chat. Courtney, have you peeked at any of those?
I was looking at a few. And one of them about just with the tablets. I was actually trying to see if I could get on my phone because I wanted to see what they were talking about. So I'm going to kind of do I want to play with that a little bit to kind of see. I'm just talking about some of the tools, because typically SeeSaw is supposed to be, I'm curious kind of what kind of tablet, because like I know on the iPad app is supposed to be pretty good. Mm-hmm. So let me do a little research on that and see what's kind of happening. Yeah.
Okay. Right. Okay, I lost my chat. Okay, there it is. So if anybody has a question, just shout it out if we didn't get to you. Oh, the sight word activity. Yeah, I will share that. I'm going to be old school and write this down. So Amy, I'll send you a link to the sight word activity. Those you can find just in the library, the teacher library. My son just did one not too long ago, actually. Okay.
I don't have a question. I just have a comment. My kids' teachers are using SeeSaw, and I have the app on my phone, and since they're in campus club now, like, and I get the updates of them turning in assignments throughout the day, that's my favorite part of it. So I was like,
oh yeah,
to learn it, because I'm like, I'm not around them, they're not technically in school, so the app has been the best thing, I think, to communicate with their teachers and everything.
oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Trying to see if I can.
Ooh, a SeeSaw for help for parents. I think.
Oh, you know what? One thing that we didn't talk about, we kind of are out of time, and some of you are gone. I don't know how much you would use this. We used it a bunch last year, but there's a Chrome extension for SeeSaw Reflect, and it basically, if you use the snipping tool on, you know, if you use the snipping tool, the Chrome extension is essentially like a snipping tool, and if you take your kids, like say you go to Epic and you're reading a book and you want the kids to find a little paragraph or passage about something that you're learning about, if they use that, they can snip off their screen, anything or the whole page, and it will drop it into the whiteboard space on their SeeSaw classroom, and they can annotate on it. And so I know that we did that quite a bit. I know we were working on point of view, or we were working on just research strategies, those kinds of things. And the kids love it. And it's a great way to then allow them to be able to mark it up, and then you have it. So.
So the tablet thing, this is a very common mistake that students make when they need to go to an assignment when they haven't been using it. If they just click on the picture of the assignment and not add response, it's just going to give them a large view of the assignment with no
That's what they're doing.
That's what I was thinking.
I bet that is what they're doing.
It's a super common thing. I've had parents on the phone and they're like, I see the activity, but there's no tools to use. And I'm like, is there an X in the top right corner? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, okay, X out of that, you have to click the green add response button. And I usually tell my students that too, the first time I have them working on it, because that is confusing. They just want to click on the picture of the assignment instead of the add response button. So
it's always the green button, always the green button, always the green button.
That's got to be it, because it's, I know that it's compatible with iPads, and I have 2 or 3 students every time, Mrs. Chambers, I don't have the pencil, or I can't find the record, you know, and so I think that must be what they're doing. They're just clicking on the picture. Can they still do the activity though? Do you know what I mean? Like they can't draw or anything, huh?
No,
they're just looking, it's just the image, you know.
That's gotta be it, because every time I'm like, restart.
In fact, I'll show you what that looks like, just to give you an idea of what I mean by that. Okay, so here's their activities, right? So if they want to do this activity, a lot of students just automatically go and they click on the picture, and all it does is it pops up a big picture, and you'll see there's no tools, but there's an X to get rid of that. And they just make sure they're clicking that add response button. Yeah.
I'm sure that's probably what they're doing. I've done that before when I was good to go look at something, because you have to remember to click on the title if you're the teacher. Oh, and you know what else? That the other thing too is that we didn't talk about is if you, the teacher, want to view progress, if you click the title of the assignment, your students, I think I put a slide into that slide deck and added it, but it will populate all of your students' little slides at the bottom, and you can see the progress that they've made, which is kind of handy too. So then you know who started the assignment, especially if they're at home, you have no idea. You can see who has started the assignment, who hasn't, if you just click the title in the activity stream.
I have one more question. Sorry, I'm talkative. I know that they have the camera option, and I teach first grade. So if I want them to take a picture of their writing, what's the best way for them to do that without a parent's help?
We have second graders that do that. That's basically how our second grade teachers are doing writing, and they're grading it somehow from that. But some of the picture quality is not so good. It depends on the device. So I would recommend that the kids find something like hard to put their paper against. So you would have to train them, and that they put it like on the desk, and then they they steady it on a table, you know, or they have someone help them and hold it, you know. So they have to learn how to see the screen and be able to do that. So it's definitely training, but I think if they can put it on a hard surface and then rest it on something, so they're not trying to, because they have to push the camera button too at the same time. So it's best if they do have help. I know that's difficult, but yeah.
Thank you.
That, or if they take a picture with like I know you said no mom or dad help, but yeah, if they take a picture with another thing and then they have the picture, you know, on their computer, they can upload it, but that's again with parent help. That is the struggle with that.
I have a side question.
Uh-huh.
Have you ladies ever heard of something called whiteboard.fi?
Mm-hmm. I have.
Okay.
We've had it at one of our meetings. The reason why I haven't really pushed that one is because depending on your the abilities that your computer, your device is going to have at home, you have to be able to adjust to a lower or higher setting depending. And I thought that was a little tricky. Okay. The nice thing about it is you can see all their whiteboards, but you can technically see all their whiteboards in SeeSaw too. If you click the activity, you can see everything. I think there's other platforms that kind of accomplish the same purpose. Another whiteboard that you might want to look at too is Jamboard, because that's a Google whiteboard app and it's in Google. And I mean, that's like one of my favorite things.
I can show that to her.
Okay, yeah, because I tried the whiteboard FI because it's so good because you can just push it out and they can get the link, but then I couldn't see like 8 of their devices were not showing. And I'm like, oh, this would have been so perfect. They were probably the ones that needed to switch over, and it's hard when they're on their own and they don't, you know, because I know it looks like it's like, oh my gosh, it's amazing. And then, yeah. Okay.